Buon pomeriggio a tutti e benvenuti a questo incontro.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this conference of this year's meeting. The title of this conference is The Unity of the Person. My name is Giulia Guidi, and I'm currently attending the Catholic University in Milan. Together with me today, we have Professor Pilar Vigil. Thank you. She is a specialized doctor, obstetrician, and she works at the University of Chile, and we give her a round of applause. Together with her, we also have Father José Clavería, who is the rector of the Sacred Heart Foundation in Milan. Let's give him an applause. So, why did we decide to hold a meeting like this, a conference like this, and why this title? Well, this conference was born in, let's say, March 2017, and to the experience that I had when I took part in the Teen Star project. It was a project that was hosted by the Catholic University in Milan, and Pilar attended that course as well. And actually she was one of the teachers of that formation course. And it is very important, and the focus of that project is affectivity and sexuality. I took part in that project because a friend of mine told me about that project, and when she told me about the things that they were doing there, it was clear to me that something important had happened in her, and she was astonished by something, and it was very easy for me to understand that it was something that somehow was calling me to, because I was so curious about the experience that she was having. So I took part in the project, as I said, and the first thing that happened was the meeting with Pilar. And her presence there was great because she helped me and all the other participants in the project to better understand ourselves, to better understand who we are, our human beings, both on a biological, psychological, physical, human level. And in those days, it was so clear for me that I was curious again to discover what my humanity really is about in all of its aspects. So new questions arose in me, simple questions that which are so simple, but that we never ask ourselves. For example, who am I? Why am I made this way? What is my body for? What is the purpose of my body? Well, I started asking myself those questions, and they became relevant to my life. And there was something new. Something new happened in me when I met with Pilar, because I met a person that cut off any kind of embarrassment that we usually have when we talk about affectivity or sexuality. We avoid talking about those issues, maybe because we don't know much about those issues, or maybe because, as I said, we are somehow embarrassed sometimes. And as I was saying, Pilar wasn't afraid of talking about these issues. She wanted to address those questions, those needs that we all have. Those questions that we have when we when we take seriously our desire to love and to be loved. And this was like a revolution for me. So this is why I wanted to invite Pilar here to the meeting, and that is where we thought about this title for this conference, the unity of the person. Why? Well, because I realized that every aspect of my life, and above all, this specific issue, affectivity and sexuality, all of these has to do with my destiny. And it also has to do with my desire to be happy. So I met with Pilar, and that was a great chance for me, because she was like a witness for me, because she wanted to personally address those questions that I had never asked myself before. So I started to see a new perspective, talking about sexuality, living my sexuality without giving up in terms of my desire to be loved. So together with her, with Pilar, we decided to invite Mr. Clavería, and we informally called him Don Pepe, Father Pepe, so that he could help us discuss this issue. And the first question that I would like to ask him, Don Pepe, Father Pepe, is the following one. But first, some facts of his life. He studied law and economics in Madrid, and in 1985, he entered the seminary, and he was a parish priest, and he also taught in a state school. He moved to Vienna in 1996, and he was a teacher there in state schools for 9 years. Then he works at university, and he collaborates with young people of university. In 2012, he moved to London, and he worked there for 1 year. And then from 2013 to 2017, he was the parish the parish priest in a parish nearby London. And he also was the member of the board of directors of the Catholic school St. Emborn. And as I was saying, he has been the rector of the Sacred Heart Foundation in Milan for 1 year. So here with us we have a man who somehow had to deal with young people. He met their needs, and he also talked with them about all kinds of questions and issues that we have when we are teenagers. So the first question is, what was the need that you saw in those young people's faces? Why did you take so seriously the issue of affectivity and sexuality? Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I spend a lot of time with teenagers, high school students, and I have a lot of fun. And it is clear for me that to make someone happy, to make especially a young person happy, it is fundamental to talk about sexuality and affectivity. Today I would like to show you some thoughts, some remarks, some questions that I have when I spend time with my high school students. Well, first of all, you, Giulia, you've just asked me, why do I deal with these issues, affectivity and sexuality? Well, working in a school, I realized that young people always have one specific type of problem that deals with affectivity. Of course, when you deal with young students, when you deal with students, you have a wide perspective of them. Okay, you think how smart he is, how much he studies, what is his family about, where does he come from, where does he live. But at the same time, I always ask, what is the human aspect that lies behind his performance at school, especially if that performance is bad? All these issues must be taken into account by every type of educators. For example, the relationship between the students and his parents and his friends, with his classmates, with his teachers, with his girlfriend. the majority of teachers only want to deal with school issues, let's say, but that's not enough, because of course every school issue or school trouble is deeply related to every human aspect of those boys and girls. And the relationship between the teacher and a student is fundamental. Every teaching is possible because of a relationship. And teachers show that they care about this relationship through their passion, and also through the severity with which they want their students to work hard. And teachers are important also because they need to show their passion for what they do. And of course, what I realized is that the students that have no issues with affectivity or sexuality, usually they perform better at school. So these two aspects cannot be considered in a separate way, because as the title says, the unity of the person is one person, okay? We don't live into separate ways of life. We only have one life. So one question that we must ask ourselves is how do we teach students to live their relationships in school? At school we deal with every types of subjects, as you know, and of course we talk about politics, ethics, or existential issues. We talk about that. We don't give definite answers to those questions, but we need to address those issues. And this holds true for affectivity as well. Sometimes they are considered to be taboo topics, taboo issues, because nobody knows what they have to say. But then sometimes we think and we claim that we must ask ourselves and the students fundamental questions for our lives. For example, what am I looking for? If we have it clear, if we have the answer to the question clear, then everything goes smoother. Okay, that's right, but we can also we can talk about any issues, any specific issue, without addressing the existential question, who am I, or what am I going, where am I going? I mean, we can also deal with every single aspect of reality. Why did I say taboo issues in terms of affectivity and sexuality? Well, because we are afraid of talking about those issues, and of course, if you don't have a clear idea, a clear position about that, then you shouldn't be allowed to talk about that. Secondly, I've also thought that young people always make mistakes between affection and feelings. Today, young people are chasing every types of feelings, but at the same time they suffer from loneliness, from instability. Why? Well, we can do whatever we want, we can do everything, but not if we don't know how to do that. We are afraid of the risk, we are afraid of making decisions. I don't know if you have ever seen one episode of the TV series Black Mirror, Hank the DJ, and DJ is a boy. That episode shows young people who are not certain about their relationships, their friends, and they want to understand who their next girlfriend or boyfriend is going to be. And since they're not able to make decisions, they let a computer program make those decisions. They just push a button and they have the name of their next girlfriend or boyfriend, and they also have a time, for example 6 months, 9 months, in which they're gonna go out with this person, an expired date. And this computer program analyzes those relationships, and at the end the program provides those students with a final idea of relationship. So they study the person, they study the different relationships that they have, and they give them a final, let's say, boyfriend or girlfriend. So young people in that episode, they deal with a different kind of, very different kinds of relationships. if you think of our human experience, for example, you get sick of things. For example, if you always eat Nutella and that's it, you don't want it anymore after a while. Well, that's the same with human relationships. This is why that program has an expired date. That system, the computer program, will tell you the expired date of that relationship, and then you will change and get another person. But in that episode, there is something that doesn't work, because in the episode, the protagonist feels the need for something more. Well, actually, the two main characters. And that's the same that happens in our life. In our life, we chase various types of feelings, we analyze them, but we don't want to engage ourselves with the other person. We avoid, we escape from love with capital L. Some days ago I was in Rome with Pope Francis and with young people, and we were discussing these issues. A girl asked Pope Francis how to live the relationship with her boyfriend, and Pope Francis says, well, young people recognize what true love is, and they are able to tell it apart from other types of feelings, but they are able to recognize what true love is. So why does it happen? Because it's difficult to handle, to manage our feelings in different relationships. Of course, there are lots of feelings going on in a relationship, especially at the beginning of a new relationship. And that's good because, you know, attraction works in a natural way. Feelings help you understand more the reality. So a part of the initial emotion of the feelings is useful because you get to know reality even more in a deeper way. But, and this is a paradox, another part of these feelings, of this emotion, needs to be detached. You need to be detached by that person. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself very, very sad. What is affection? Affection is the capacity of man of engaging with something good that he sees in reality. Affection is the capacity of being engaged with what you have seen and to stick with it. Of course, you need to recognize, to be aware of the value of that relationship. Well, and this allows you to see and to know more and more. This is a good relationship. Affection helps us so that we can know more. It nourishes us as little children. And of course, there is a part of this feeling, of this emotion that tells us, of course, you need the energy of the affection. It also entails some hardship. It costs, but it is necessary for a durable relationship to develop what the initial feeling is. Because the feeling is temporary. It goes away. So we need the affection so that we can get the most important part of the relationship. A friend of mine has recently told me, well, I've done everything that I could not to lose my boyfriends, but it never worked. And at some point, I had a new relationship and he loved me for free, without expecting anything in exchange. So, and to conclude with, a fragile affectivity is the cause for dispersion, for confusion. Young people just try one thing after another with no interruption. Bauman says, if people take for granted that everything is temporary, well, then everything actually becomes temporary. Every action becomes temporary and without a good foundation. So, hurt and bewildered, we leave some people behind because people start losing their original meaning, their value, and we abandon them as a broken toy. This is why we have so many bad relationships. And at the same time, a lot of people feel rejected, both in our society and in the social networks. For example, if you don't get high numbers of likes. So what can we do? If your affection is educated, you are aware of the importance of the other person in front of you, and you start building long-lasting relationships.
Pilar, I would like to ask you a similar question. But I would also like to give you some pieces of information about Pilar. We have already said she studied obstetrics and gynecology. She also carried out her PhD in Texas and Australia. She teaches at the Catholic University of Chile. She is a worldwide famous researcher, and she has held more than 30 conferences in several countries. She has taken part in more than 2,200 conferences all over the world. She has a great influence on Chile's press. She is member of the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology and the Academy for Life. She is the manager of the Reproductive Health Institute. And I would like to ask you, Pilar, why?
Why did you decide to deal with affectivity and sexuality? What is the need that you detected in young people, and why did you set up the Teen Star project? Why are you here with us today?
Thank you very much. Before I start, I have to say I'm here because of a very deep gaze, because of how someone looked at me a few years ago, and many times over my life course. And I want to share this with you. Even when I was very little, I was really interested in the beginning of life, how life is created. And I had the chance to study it because I worked at this biological sciences faculty. Here is a wonderful picture. It is a model we took in those years from animals. During my experience as a doctor, as a gynecologist, I was lucky enough to meet with John and Evelyn Billings, and we were friends. This is why it was totally natural for me to teach women how to understand whether they were fertile or not. After some time, I met with a believer, Anna Klaus. And with that, we held our first seminar in Chile's Catholic University. Maria Teresa took part in this seminar. Maria Teresa was a biology professor in Chile. And during that seminar, her daughter, a teenager just as her students, was giving birth at the hospital. And this professor told us to, had you taught me all of this before, then I wouldn't have had this child as a teenager. It was very difficult for me to remain silent while witnessing this beauty. And so we started our seminar, and we held other seminars in other countries. I chose some countries, Anna Klaus held seminars in other countries, and then people started criticizing us. Many people, both believers and not. And I really didn't understand this criticism. Because, as I said, teaching this was absolutely natural and beautiful to me. And I was quite desperate, I have to say. I had no contacts or links with the Vatican or with Rome. I had no connections with them, and I live very, very far away from the Pope's home. So, while I was this desperate, I spoke to the Lord, and I said, look, either the Pope tells me I'm doing something good, this is right, or I'm just going to give up. Because I've never heard so much criticism against something you should take care of. And from that moment, many interesting coincidences started taking place. But I also have to say that after 3 months of praying, I was standing before John Paul II. He had heard about Teen Star from Wanda Poltowska. He looked at me, he looked me in the eyes and said, go on. This program is very good. I shall never forget the spark in his eyes. And you can imagine how excited and touched I was. I couldn't speak. So people were asking me, what did he tell you? Why are you crying? Well, the truth is, I didn't tell him anything, but his eyes. His eyes had been the answer to my desperation, to my worries. The Lord is so kind. The following year, I became member of the Academy for Life, and I met with Pope John Paul II several times. You see here a map I used to show him where our program Teen Star was taking place, and he always said, "That's good, that's good." Now, Teen Star is present in many countries of all the 5 continents, but I should also say that from that moment, the relationship, the beautiful relationship with my teenage daughters, gave me the strength to do everything, because as parents, we realized we didn't have to have all the answers, but we had to enable people to discover themselves, asking questions. So the goal of Teen Star is to strengthen people's identity, embracing all the parts of their personality, the physical dimension, the social dimension, everything. Teen Star wants people to be at peace with themselves, to be at peace with their affections, even with reason. But people should also find their place within the external world, the external circumstances. We want to accompany people. We want to be with them. And this is why we have to keep in mind that each one of us has a different experience. We are all different from one another. We should look at each other and think, who is this other, this person? Thus we can create creative alternatives. And we should always remember that a person is living in a particular moment of their life, always. So this is why when we talk to a child, it's different from when we talk to a teenager, to an adult, or to elderly people. We want every single human being to ask themselves this question: who am I? Am I something or am I someone? Am I a creature or am I a creator? Am I called to a transcendency? Thank you very much.
Entrambi mettete come in risalto.
You both have talked about the need, everyone's need of asking themselves questions, real questions, and that affectivity and sexuality, they are human issues, as you were saying also, Father Pepe. So I would like to ask you both a question, because sometimes we tend to believe that this need, which is the most basic need that we have, which is to love and to be loved, doesn't need to be educated. We don't need an education for this. But what is the risk of that? That we love through our instinct and for possession. So I would like to ask you, what does it mean for you to educate and to be educated to love and to be loved, Father Pepe? In every type of relationship, especially in the let's say the most difficult one, which is the one with your boyfriend or girlfriend, well, you need a purpose, you need a duty, you need a task, an ideal horizon. Without that, you're all going to die. Your relationship is going to die. Pope Francis said a few days ago, in real love, men have their duty and women have their duty. And do you know what's the greatest duty, what's the greatest task of the love relationship? Is totality. Everything or nothing. This is what love is about. And what's what's the task of man in love? To make more woman his girlfriend or his wife. And what's the task of the women in a love relationship? To make more men his boyfriend or husband. Everybody has to work on that, because a love relationship or a marriage is made up of both strengths and of both efforts. This is what unity is, and this is what, as the Bible says, it is one flesh. Is they become one because they help each other. This is what love in marriage is. This is a good basis in order to educate children as well. The greatest thing, the best thing we can do for our children is to take care of ourselves, is to grow up ourselves. The relationship between a man and a woman is the direct sign of the relationship with the infinite, and sex is a way of expressing this relationship, and it reminds us of the final purpose of this relationship, helping each other towards the fulfilling of life, and to offer a good environment where to educate and to take care of your children. Looking at this relationship without thinking of the infinite, it would mean not respecting that relationship, that love relationship. If you don't ask yourself, who is this marriage, this relationship of? Who allowed us to be married? Father Giussani said, when you see a mountain or a whale, you cannot just say, oh, it's a mountain, it's a whale. You must ask yourself, who has made it, who created it? As the friend of mine who adopted a child, he and his wife, they adopted this 3-year-old child, and after 2 years with them, so when she was 5, she didn't know how to read, she didn't know how to write, she didn't have any type of religious education, but they went together. They went on a trip to the Dolomites, and at some point they have in front of them a stunning scenario, a breathtaking view. So the parents stand there, they look at the mountains, and that little girl asks them, "Mom, who created these?" End of quotation. So a relationship between a girl and a boy has to entail a task. That task must be clear. Otherwise, that relationship is broken, is ambiguous. There is a lie from the very beginning. On the other hand, that relationship grows in terms of humanity if there is an initial reason, and if that reason has to do with human's destiny, if that relationship is connected to everything. Otherwise, you only find ambiguity in that relationship. It is needed a cure towards the other person. You need to take care of him, and you need to help your boyfriend or girlfriend to move towards his or her destiny. And only in that case, that relationship is a true relationship. Otherwise, it is only a lie. And it is not useful for your path towards your destiny. Of course, it is important to look for your happiness thanks to the relationship that you have. This can always happen. But of course, also the path that you follow together is important. So, how can we get to this type of discovery? How can we open a close relationship? Well, in every relationship, there is a problem. The problem of the relationship with God. Even in my relationship with this glass here, I have the problem of the relationship with God. Why the problem of the relationship with God? Because we are related to Him. And in the relationship with the others, you must ask yourself, where does he or she come from? Where is it going? Where does this glass come from? What is its purpose? Without this, you will never be able to love your girlfriend or boyfriend without asking, at least for yourself, these questions. But in order to have this passage, a sacrifice is needed. The sacrifice belongs to every type of relationship because, why sometimes we treat other people so brutally, even when we don't want to do that actually. Why does it happen? Because we don't judge our relationship with our girlfriend in the light of the question, what does it mean to truly love someone? If we had this question clear in our minds, well, we would respect our boyfriends or girlfriends. So the path actually is quite simple, but not easy. Pay attention. Go find and try and imitate those people who live their relationships looking for each other's good. And you say, well, I'm not able to do that, and that's okay. If you see someone who acts differently, someone who joyfully accepts to serve his life for someone else and not for his selfishness, well, follow him. Accept that you don't know what it really means to love someone truly, and please let yourself be educated by that person who seems to have a bigger horizon, a wider horizon and perspective in the way he lives his relationships. The only way to save a relationship is not an idea or a thought or a desire. The only way to save a relationship is a greater relationship that offers a bigger context, so that I can deeply understand and analyze my human nature. What am I? Who is this person in front of me? What is the nature of the relationship between me and you? So, a place where the ideal happens in a clearer way, as if it would never happen in yourself. Well, this is the only way we can have the strength of risking towards new horizons and new perspectives when you see something happening in front of you.
Para responder esta pregunta.
To answer this question, I would like to remind you all what Pope Ratzinger said. He used to say, we should understand that man needs to be educated, and we should understand in what he needs to be educated. We should develop a Christian pedagogy that should become the concrete expression of our faith. We must never try to take the second step before the first. First the physical, then the spiritual. What does this mean? Some people try and manipulate others. Because many times people cannot understand themselves, and they do not know themselves, and this person can be very easily manipulated. A man or a woman should be aware of themselves, should know their own identity, and in this way no one could manipulate them. But how can we know ourselves? We can do it through a pedagogy that shows us who we are, both physically and spiritually and transcendent, from a transcendent point of view. This is a way of teaching. Body and soul are united in man, but we need to start from our nature. As Ratzinger says, man has always rebelled against the limitations imposed on him as creature. And as also Chesterton used to say, there's a famous quote by him. He told this to he had in mind a group of fish rebelling against water. And he said, well, if you think wrong, you go wrong. Now, a more concrete example, which is about many women. Women has her period. Menstruation is a part of her. And there are natural changes that happen with her hormones, with her ovaries. As you see here, there are several levels of progesterone and estrogens. For very clear reasons, women are very often surprised by all of this, by her own fertility. And when she has many children, it means she rebelled against all of this. It means a woman has rebelled against all of this and decided to take a pill. The pill changes the way our hormones work. So it changes hormonal balance, which is no longer a natural balance. Many women choose to take the pill for several reasons, maybe because they have acne, maybe because of the period cramps and period pains. And some women just take it because everyone does it, because her friends take the pill. And what have we just shown you with all of this? Well, there's a very interesting study that was carried out in the northern countries. And they showed the high level of depression affecting women taking the pill and contraceptives, especially young women, teenagers. Because when you change a teenager's nature, then the teenager will feel depressed, just like fish rebelling against water. So what alternatives do we have? Today we do have alternatives. We have precious alternatives. For example, we're starting to understand that ovulation for women is a great sign of health. We need to understand this. And then what happens when, for some women, ovulation doesn't work the way it should? There's a lot of treatments nowadays. We have therapies to treat hormones or other factors, metabolic conditions, for example, so that the woman can find her hormonal balance and can feel good. hormonal balance helps women feel good, and not only women but also men. And what happens when we teach all of this to our girls? Something very beautiful. On the right of this slide, you have the pregnancy rate of women that acquire this knowledge with respect to the ones who didn't learn all of this. You see that pregnancy rate goes down when they know more, when they have more knowledge. Because when I know myself, I can take good decisions for me and for myself. And this happens with boys too. If I know every part of me, I can make good decisions. I can understand what I want to do, who I want to be, what my calling is. I think this is a wonderful moment for humanity. We have concrete tools to show man who man is. But as Ratzinger says, remember that a pedagogy has to be Christian, has to be concrete, has to be flesh.
Pilar, tu ci hai parlato in modo molto significativo.
Thank you for your intervention. For your speech, we understood what it means to discover who we really are, and this is a need that arises in every type of relationship. Also, the desire to know who the other is and to know the other more. But these issues sometimes might be ambiguous because common thought says that in order to know the other properly, you need to know everything of the other. So every aspect of his life, to know him from a physical point of view, in every detail of his life and of his person. So the question that I would like to ask you both is the following. What is your experience of affectivity in a relationship with the other, and what makes possible a real knowledge of the self? Father Pepe. Well, sometimes young people come to me and they tell me that they want to know each other in the most exhaustive way to make a less risky decision. What I always say is no risk, no fun. But apart from that, I think that the way to know the other is not only looking at each other in your eyes for a long time and alone. No. As it happens with a painting, for example, or generally speaking with an artwork, if you are detached from it, you can have a wider and better perspective. So if you start thinking about your relationship as something closed, you can know the other more. If you start knowing also his family, his friends, if you see the way he works or he lives. A few moments ago, someone was telling me, look the way he treats his mother, his brothers and sisters, and you can understand the way he is going to treat you in 10 years. But the big issue, the big question is, what am I looking for? When I was 25, I remember that with my brother, and he had almost my same age, and he used to go out at night. He lived more at night, actually. And one day he woke up late in the morning, as usually, and he went out, he bought a coffee and his breakfast, and he bought the newspaper. And one day there on the road, after buying the newspaper, he sees a couple They were 90 more or less. He was struggling to walk, and his wife was helping him to walk. And she was telling him what she had cooked for lunch. So he came back at home and he told me, I want my life to be that way when I grow up. I don't want disposable relationships. This is what I really want for me. So, another question. What do I want? This is the question that we must ask ourselves. What am I looking for in a relationship? What do I want from that relationship? Is the other someone who can fulfill me, or is there something more? Is there a mystery that I need to discover to find out? Okay, I'm gonna be fast now. Well, there is an educational emergency. Sometimes we have this question issue: how can we educate our wife, children, or whoever to understand these things? How can we help them take a step forward in their relationships? I just want to tell you something, especially to teachers and to parents. Don't look for something special. Don't look for the perfect speech to convey this message, because this is a huge mistake. Sometimes we adults, we don't want to talk about that. We want to avoid those types of dialogues because we are embarrassed. We really want to avoid any type of that, any kind of that conversation. We must be aware that those boys and girls, that our students, our children, are going to have their own path. They shouldn't get easy answers at the beginning of their lives. We don't have to explain everything to them. We don't need to use protectionism in a way, because it's like using an atomic bomb. It's like saying, well, without me, you're never going to be successful in your life and in your relationships. So please don't be that protective towards your students or children. If you take care of them, if you care about them, well, they will understand something more in terms of affectivity only if he finds other people who have a real experience of affectivity. So the greatest help can be found in a person, in a witness that is respectful towards a flower, that leaves it on the ground. So if you live virginity, you remind everyone of the wider perspective of the eternity. Virginity, it might seem a lack of relationship, but if it is lived through an affection to the other, well, it is like a glue, and it is more attractive than any other kind of relationship.
¿Qué hace posible?
What makes it possible to know the other, to know other people? Astonishment. Every human being is unique, and human beings at a certain moment can decide to stop and swim against the current. This is what we call astonishment. This is when someone asks themselves, where am I going? Who loved me first and made my existence possible? Am I meant to be self-sufficient or not? Or am I meant to have relationships? So what about astonishment? Astonishment always starts and happens through the five senses. The first kind of astonishment that we experience is when a child recognizes someone else, another person, the mother or the father. He is fascinated, the child is fascinated by this relationship, by this bond. And this makes it possible for the child to look at this infinite horizon. The child starts to understand that someone loves him. And what happens now with many young people? They are always communicating with each other. So many social networks or messages on WhatsApp. But they communicate a lot, and at the same time, they have less and less, fewer and fewer relationships. To communicate doesn't mean to engage with someone else or to have a relationship with someone else. We need to understand the importance of a relationship, of engaging with each other. Relationships originate from a deep gaze. Now, there may be a paradox. For example, a child or a young person may receive a lot of messages on their birthday, but they are celebrating on their own. They have no one. We shouldn't allow this to happen. Relationships are always personal, and relationships need to be experienced. So, one's worth doesn't have anything to do with the likes I get on Facebook. We should look for intimacy. What is intimacy? Intimacy happens when I exist in someone else's heart. Is an ability that needs to be educated. Now, what happens nowadays when we talk about sexual education? As Pope Francis said, frequently sex education deals primarily with protection through the practice of safe sex. This way of thinking promotes narcissism and aggressivity in place of acceptance. Now, let's look at an example. We were told sex has to be safe. The evolution of same sex. That's what I'm going to talk about now. Now, we nowadays have tools to manage HIV and AIDS through therapies, both before and after exposition. We need to use condoms. We have several tools we can use for any part of our body. We have pills. And pills to increase the pleasure or to reduce it. And they tell us sex is wonderful. But how can a young person understand that sex is wonderful? When we are in front of each other, we look like an alien or maybe an astronaut, someone strange. This is very difficult to understand. It is important to understand what is real, what is really important. And since sex is part of our life, it is a part of all the relationships that we have. The love relationships, of course. So we should never forget about intimacy, which means that I exist in someone else's heart. And this happens also through. Sorry, this is different from a sexual intercourse, which is, of course, a wonderful part of a human's life, but a sexual intercourse, sex, is beautiful when it's real, not when it's distorted. Because I need to protect myself from another person that I love. This is why we can only achieve intimacy when we can live and exist in someone else's heart. And now let's look at the evolution of safe sex. We have all these kinds of treatments that may seem very strange. Young people sometimes struggle with the idea that sex is something positive. So they should never forget that we can achieve intimacy only when our body and our soul are unified. We are human beings. We can be astonished. And this astonishment is possible thanks to our 5 senses.
Pilar, tu ci hai parlato di
Pilar, you mentioned relationships and intimacy. Well, I'd like to get a better understanding of these aspects. So I want to ask you, what does it mean to really meet someone else? What does it mean to have a real relationship with someone else? Because as you told us, in order to meet someone else, it is necessary to have one's identity, to have a unity of the person. So we might think that in order to meet with the other, a sacrifice, a mediation, or an effort might be needed, and that might get ourselves lost. So this is why I want you to answer, what does it mean to really meet with the other? And is it possible to meet with the other without losing your own identity and unity?
Otro.
Thank you for this question. To meet another person, we should always remember our identity and be aware of it. We are a unified body and soul, as I have already said. So now we should ask ourselves a question. How do I want to live my life? How would I like my relationship with you to be? So we need to be educated on this. Otherwise, we're gonna spend our life looking at ourselves in the mirror, trying and understand something about ourselves. We need to recognize ourselves both in our body and in our soul. We need to learn how to integrate all of these parts, how to join all of these components. And we should also be aware of the great challenge of our time. This challenge is ideology. I can do whatever I want. But in this way, we deny reality. And by denying reality, I cannot use my freedom. So if I deny reality, then I lose my identity. And if I lose my identity, it is not possible to have any relationship with someone else, because for a relationship to be founded on true love, we need freedom. We need reciprocity. We need freedom in giving myself and accepting you, and truth as well. When I start looking at my real nature, then I realize who I really am. And only then I can be in front of you and help you exist. And by helping you exist, I also help myself exist. I do not manipulate you, but our relationship generates our love. So this is why freedom breaks the chain of manipulation. Nowadays, many people have a very passive way of life. They do not exercise, do not eat healthy. Some people even have 2 or 3 jobs so that they can improve their quality of their life. Other people instead respect their own body so much that they forget about the transcendent part, and they forget about the spiritual aspects. But they believe to be happy. Without realizing, they are destroying themselves. Now, these people think they can just live their life, relax. There are people who are not able to understand themselves. And sometimes this state of things, this leads someone to commit suicide, and there are a lot of young people who decide to take their own life. There are elderly people who are not able to see the meaning of their life. This is why a human being needs to recognize that he or she is not meant to be alone. We are surrounded by other people, and we are meant to have relationships. This is when love starts playing an important role, a creative alternative. Love is possible only when we break the chain of manipulation. And this is possible only if we have a very strong individual identity. Then we can also have friends. And now, at this point, we start looking at the horizon of the infinite. I see it in the eyes of the people I share my life with.
Grazie.
Thank you so much. You have repeatedly talked about this human being which cannot be manipulated, and somehow the issue, the problem of manipulation has to do with the value of someone, of the person. Because if we know what our value is, then nobody will be able to manipulate ourselves. So I would like to address a final question that maybe it is about the biggest lie of our century. What lie am I talking about? That we must deserve that good that we wish for. We must deserve the good we wish for, and this is why we are only focused on our performance or that make us lie in front of other people. This idea makes us hide who we really are. So I would like to ask you both, why do we have this idea? Why do we have to fight against this idea, and how can we recognize and discover what our real value really is? A Korean sociologist and philosopher who is currently working in Germany, Byung-Chul An. I don't know if my pronunciation is correct. And he wrote a very short book called Eros in Agony. And he says the Eros is a relationship with the other. And it goes beyond the performance and the power. I repeat. The Eros is a relationship with the other that goes beyond performance and power. We have lots of relationships made up of performances and powers. Well, in the Eros, let's say, we don't have any of those. But what happens when the Eros as well is reduced to performance or to power? Well, in that case, when this happens, how can we escape such a trivial idea of life? And that's what Pilar was warning us against, manipulation. Manipulation is a blackmail sometimes. If you don't do the way I want, then you'll be alone. Well, we can escape this mentality only if we are certain that we were loved without any requirement. If we know that we can start a new journey towards a fulfillment from an affectivity point of view. And we can do that. And by doing this, we can respect the other's path. And we will never be manipulated in that way. I would like to conclude by reading some lines that a friend of mine, I think she is 24 or 26, she told me these things a few days ago. And this is something that I wish all of you could experience in their lives. Since I was a young girl, I've always had possessive relationships with boys, possessing the other. It was the way to feel other people's love, to feel loved by someone else. I didn't know any other type of modality. I thought that possession was a safe way to be loved and not to be alone. And also the sexual encounter, it was a way to feel a void, a lack that I had. And also I was hoping that I would find happiness in that encounter, in sexual encounters. But time passed by, and this lack inside me was always bigger, and my wound was bleeding more and more. I thought that the problem was only mine, that I had a problem with my body, that I wasn't capable of loving. But I started living the sexual encounter as something violent, my identity. I was losing my identity. Everything was minimalized. I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't fulfilled. And I wanted to chase other trivial feelings. But at some point, I found friends. I found some people who really cherished me, who really loved me. And I discovered that affectivity, both with friends and with your boyfriend, is not just a feeling, but it has to be educated with a method. It is made up of sacrifices, otherwise it's only temporary. As we were saying before, the affection is necessary for the relationship. And I also realized that I had more questions, I had more nostalgia, but at the same time, I was more grateful in my days, my everyday life, and I didn't need to comply with anyone's requirements. Some time ago, I met with my current boyfriend, and he told me that he had never had sex with any other women before, and at first I thought, oh God, this is going to be a problematic guy, and I laughed at him. But then I realized that I was jealous about his experience. And of course, a lot of my friends and my family, they used to criticize me because they said this was a new crazy way of living a relationship. I thought that adhering to chastity was simply abstinence was something not good for me. But what has changed now? Well, now I live so that I can understand something more about myself, and by doing that, I find myself more free, because I don't want to comply with other people's requirements, as I said before. And I also had the constant fear of being abandoned because I felt inadequate. So I wasn't free. And I also was afraid of sexual encounters with my actual boyfriend. But today this has changed. Now the attraction is even bigger. And how did it happen? Because I know that I don't have to comply with his needs. I don't have to satisfy his needs. Of course, you desire a bodily and human relationship with the other, but it is necessary. What is the final purpose of your relationship? What the final purpose of your relationship is, and the sacrifice becomes an instrument, a tool to walk together towards a grace that reveals itself more and more along the way. End of quotation. Thanks for your attention.
Como hemos visto,
as we have seen, today man has an internal strength, an interior strength, which could also lead to his self-destruction. But we need to have a look at this. We shouldn't neglect this. Real knowledge enables us to be really free. So, what do we have to do to conclude? To come to the conclusions? We should recognize ourselves and accept ourselves, and also say yes to our calling. We have to find out what our calling is. So, I would like you all to look at Mary. Mary and her yes. She says yes. A yes that comes from her humanity. She accepts her fertility. With her yes, she gave us the greatest gift of all for humanity. Mary gave us her son. God that came to us. Mary makes us this gift. Thanks to the freedom that comes after one recognizes oneself. And she trusted totally her own creator. She says yes to her nature, to who she is. And I also would like you to look at the yes the son said to his father. Even to the extreme. This is a yes that is said by someone who accepts their own limits, limits that mean the end of their terrestrial life. So even the son says yes to his father. And this shows us total faith, total trust. Trust in the one who created him and the one who calls him. So Jesus was the real man, and he shows us through his yes what total freedom means. It is what sanctity is. Sanctity is possible thanks to the incarnation. So how can we say our yes? We are not God. We are human beings. What do we need to say our yes? I would like to remind you all of the words of Father Giussani. If I were to open my eyes for the first time in this instant, I would be overpowered by the wonder and awe of things as a presence. And remembering this and knowing this will help us say our yes. Please do with me whatever you want. We were created out of love, and we are meant to love and to be loved. And during this journey that is life, we will meet so many people who will show us the face of Christ. And on this note, I would like to conclude by thanking, first of all, my family, whose faces are with me every single day, whose astonishment is with me every single day. I would like to thank my Italian, Spanish friends, my friends from all over the world. They know exactly who I am. I'd like to thank the Teen Star staff, the Teen Star team, especially the ones that are with me every single day, and my Chile team. I would like to thank all of you, because by organizing this meeting, you show us how we can do wonderful things when, as human beings, we work together and with the freedom of the sons and daughters of God. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to add just one thing. I think we could say that this year's meeting's title is true, because what you've just said is about education, self-knowledge, identity, friendship, humanity, astonishment. And it takes into account our desire to be loved and to love, and it puts it within a bigger universe. whereas we usually reduce our desires. So what I want to say is that what the human heart desire is for this desire for freedom to explode. We are part of something bigger. You've just shown this to us, and this can change history. The last thing I would like to say is that, as you know, the meeting is a totally free experience. Every exhibition, every conference is offered for free, thanks to those who organize the meeting and those who work here. You can contribute by donating. You can find special places all over the meeting. You see them, you can recognize them thanks to the color red. It would be a great gift. Thank you very much for being here, and another round of applause.